In November 2019, Elon Musk stood in front of a truck he called Bulletproof and watched its windows shatter twice on live television. Tesla's stock fell more than 5% the next morning. Then something strange happened. Nearly 200,000 people put down deposits within a week on a truck that didn't run yet, at a price that wouldn't hold, built by a company that hadn't figured out how to manufacture it. 7 years later, the truck is real, the stainless steel is real, and so are the recalls. And the numbers from 2026 suggest the Cybertruck isn't just underperforming. Bloomberg just ranked it worse than the Ford Edsel, the car that has defined automotive failure for almost 70 years. The truck built to survive a sledgehammer couldn't survive a balance sheet. The story starts on a stage in Hawthorne, California, a few miles from SpaceX's rocket factory, on the night of November 21, 2019. Musk had spent months teasing something radical, and when the cover finally came off, the room didn't quite know what it was looking at. It looked less like a pickup truck and more like a prop smuggled out of a low-budget science fiction film, all flat planes and exposed metal, with none of the curves a century of truck design had settled on. Musk called it Tesla's best product ever. He said the body was cut from the same cold-rolled stainless steel that SpaceX used on its rockets, tough enough to withstand a sledgehammer swing and stop a 9mm round. Before that, a sledgehammer swing against the door had barely left a dent, exactly as promised, and the room had cheered. Then Tesla's chief designer, Franz von Holzhausen, threw a steel ball at the driver's side window to prove the glass wouldn't crack. It cracked instantly. He threw a second ball at the rear window. That one shattered too. Musk finished the presentation standing in front of two broken windows, cursing under his breath, joking that at least the ball hadn't gone all the way through. For now, nobody seemed to care. Musk later explained, half apologizing, that the sledgehammer blow had already weakened the glass at its base, which was why the ball didn't bounce off the way it had in rehearsal. Next time, he said, they'd do the ball first. By any normal measure, that demonstration should have killed the truck before it launched. Instead, orders poured in. Musk claimed 200,000 reservations in the first week alone, climbing past 1 million within a year, each one secured with a fully refundable $100 deposit that cost Tesla nothing, and committed buyers to nothing either. The pitch was specific. A single-motor rear-wheel drive truck at $39,900, a dual-motor, all-wheel drive at $49,900, a tri-motor performance version at $69,900. It was framed as a truck for anyone: farmers, contractors, families who wanted an EV without paying a luxury price for one. Buyers weren't reserving a truck. They were reserving a promise, and for a while, that promise was worth more than the product itself. So how did a truck with 1 million reservations turn into the industry's new punchline for failure? To understand that, you have to watch what happened once Tesla actually had to build the thing, instead of just describing it on a stage. Production slipped for 4 straight years, nearly double the timeline Musk had originally promised on stage. The single-piece stainless steel exoskeleton he'd bragged about turned out to be nearly impossible to stamp into curves using conventional tooling, which is a large part of why the finished truck looks like it was folded out of sheet metal rather than shaped by a designer. When deliveries finally began on November 30th, 2023, at an event where Musk personally drove a handful of trucks onto a stage in Austin, the only version available was the Foundation Series, a fully loaded tri-motor truck badged the Cyberbeast and priced at $99,990, more than double what the original reservation holders had been promised. Tesla leaned into the towing numbers instead, figures that comfortably beat a typical F-150 configuration, and buyers didn't seem to mind the price at all. Early units flipped on auction sites like Cars and Bids for upward of $150,000. For a moment, Tesla had built the rarest thing in the car business, a truck people would pay a hype tax just to be photographed next to. Through 2024, the momentum looked real. The Cybertruck became the 3rd best-selling EV in America, and, for 4 separate months that year, the best-selling vehicle in the entire country, priced above $100,000. Roughly 38,965 units found buyers in the US, according to Cox Automotive, a number Tesla and its fans treated as proof the doubters had been wrong. Musk had once floated annual production of 250,000 units. Nobody was hitting that number yet, but in year one, even a sixth of it felt to the people writing the checks like the start of something enormous. It wasn't. It was the peak. But the version of the Cybertruck that reached driveways in 2024 was never the truck a million people had reserved back in 2019, and that gap is the choice sitting underneath everything that followed. Musk had promised a democratized electric truck, a working person's vehicle starting under $40,000. What Tesla actually built and shipped first was a six-figure collector's item for early adopters who wanted to be seen in one. It was sold as the vehicle that would finally bring EVs to mainstream truck buyers. It was actually a scarcity product, engineered for spectacle over practicality, priced for people who would never cross-shop an F-150 in the first place. That decision to chase the premium, hype-driven version of the truck before ever building the affordable one wasn't bad luck. It was a strategy. For a company that had spent a decade selling desirability over utility, it must have looked brilliant on a whiteboard. Launch expensive, ride the scarcity, let the cheaper trims follow once the assembly line matured, and the hype had already done its job. There was no $39,900 truck, no $49,900 truck, and for years, no real timeline for either one. Nobody in that room seemed to ask what would happen to demand once the mystique wore off, and the truck had to compete on the same terms as everything else parked on a dealer lot. They had no way of knowing yet how badly that bet would age. They didn't have to wait long to find out. In April 2024, 5 months after the first deliveries, Tesla recalled every single Cybertruck it had built to date, all 3,878 of them, because the accelerator pedal could physically come loose and jam against the interior trim, keeping the truck accelerating even after the driver let go. The cause, according to Tesla's own filing, was almost absurd for a vehicle marketed as bulletproof. An unapproved assembly step had introduced soap as a lubricant, and the residue kept the pedal pad from staying attached. A truck built to survive a bullet was undone by dish soap. It wasn't an isolated glitch. It was the first of 8 separate recalls Tesla issued on the Cybertruck in 2024 alone, more than any other model in its lineup that year. In November, Tesla recalled thousands more trucks for a faulty drive inverter that could cut power to the wheels without warning. No panel that reliably stayed bonded to the body. No trim piece that held at highway speed. No warning light that behaved the way federal regulators required it to. By December, Tesla had folded the Cybertruck into a nearly 700,000 vehicle recall across its lineup, the automaker's 15th recall of the year, for a tire pressure warning light that failed to stay illuminated between drives. For a truck sold on the promise of overbuilt, apocalypse-proof engineering, the actual failures kept showing up in the most mundane places imaginable. A pedal, a light, a piece of glued trim. Even loyal owners, the ones who'd waited years and paid 6 figures, started posting online about panels they had to tape down themselves between service appointments. The company had bigger problems coming than glue. Musk didn't just build a truck in this period, he built a target. By early 2025, he had become a fixture in the Trump administration, running the Department of Government Efficiency, and Tesla's badge stopped being a statement about climate and started being a statement about him. Showrooms faced protests nationwide. Some vehicles were vandalized, a handful set on fire, a few showrooms shot at. Analysts who had spent years defending Tesla's stock started using words like disaster in their notes, one calling it a fork-in-the-road moment for Musk personally. European sales fell by roughly half in a single month as buyers who once saw an EV as a values purchase started seeing a billionaire's face on the hood instead. Then came July 7th, 2025, when Musk announced he was launching his own political party. Tesla's stock dropped nearly 7% in pre-market trading, erasing about $70 billion in market value before lunch. None of that happened because of the Cybertruck specifically, but it compounded every problem the truck already had. Competitors weren't standing still either. Ford's F-150 Lightning and Rivian's R1T gave buyers a normal-looking electric truck without the politics attached, and Chinese manufacturer BYD kept closing the gap globally, eventually selling 2.26 million EVs worldwide in 2025 against Tesla's 1.64 million. outselling it globally for the first time in a full year. The broader US EV market was still growing, up nearly 30% in one quarter alone, as buyers rushed to beat the expiration of federal tax credits. The Cybertruck barely participated in any of it. It had launched as a curiosity a narrow slice of buyers would pay a premium for. It was becoming a curiosity nobody outside that slice wanted to be seen anywhere near. What made things worse is that the truck kept failing on its own terms, completely independent of Musk's politics. Tesla filed 3 more, Part 5, 7, 3 safety recalls in 2025, covering at least 115,912 Cybertrucks, the largest annual recall footprint of the truck's short life. A Part 573 filing. That's the federal paperwork automakers are legally required to submit every time they open a safety recall. And it mattered here because the paperwork alone showed how often this specific truck needed fixing. Roughly 318 trucks a day, every single day of the year. The biggest involved the cant rail, a stainless steel trim piece running along the roofline that could delaminate and detach mid-drive, covering 46,096 trucks, built between November 2023 and February 2025. A second covered a software defect that let the front parking lamps blind other drivers. Sales, meanwhile, had collapsed to 20,237 units for the year, down 48.1% from 2024. The steepest decline of any EV nameplate in the country, with a single quarter falling more than 60% year over year. Storage lots around Giga Texas reportedly held more than 10,000 unsold trucks, hundreds of millions of dollars in steel sitting in the sun, while Tesla cut prices by as much as $10,000 to move inventory and quietly discontinued the cheaper rear-wheel drive trim after barely 5 months on sale. Buyers who had paid 6 figures for an early Foundation Series truck watched trade-in offers come back in the mid-$60,000, a loss of roughly a third of the purchase price in about a year, far steeper than the 20% a typical gas truck loses over the same stretch. Then came the detail that undercut the entire demand story Tesla had been telling investors all year. Registration and fleet data showed that nearly 1 in 5 Cybertrucks sold in the fourth quarter of 2025 hadn't gone to retail customers at all. They'd gone to SpaceX and xAI, companies Musk himself controls, replacing their support fleets with the same truck almost nobody else wanted to buy. Wes Merrill, the Cybertruck's lead engineer, posted online that seeing Tesla and SpaceX's old gas-powered support vehicles, finally replaced by Cybertrucks, had been part of the dream since the truck was first designed. It was a nice sentiment. It was also, quietly, an admission of exactly where a chunk of the sales numbers had actually come from. On July 22, 2026, Bloomberg made the comparison official. Using the same target versus actual measure that made the 1957 Ford Edsel the industry's historic benchmark for failure, a car so widely mocked for the vertical grille that critics compared it to a toilet seat, Bloomberg's analysis put the Cybertruck ahead of it. Musk had projected 250,000 units a year. The truck never cracked 40,000 in its best year and had fallen every year since, a steeper miss, proportionally, than the Edsel itself ever posted. Q3 2025 alone had dropped 62.6% year over year. Q4 2025 fell 68.1%. Then Q1 2026 delivered the worst quarter in the truck's history, just 3,519 units sold in the US, down 45.1% year over year, according to Cox Automotive. Only 7,133 Cybertrucks were registered nationwide through May, per S&P Global Mobility. Hours after the Bloomberg report was published, Tesla posted a disappointing Q2 earnings result, and the stock logged its worst week since 2022, falling 17.81% to close at $313.03, more than 30% down for the year. Tesla did try to fix it. In February 2026, the company introduced a new dual-motor all-wheel drive Cybertruck at $59,990, the first version ever offered under $60,000 and, on paper, the closest thing yet to the affordable truck Musk had promised back in 2019. Demand looked real, with delivery slots filling fast. Then, exactly as Musk had signalled it would, the price jumped to $69,990 just 10 days later, a 17% increase overnight. Delivery estimates for the trim, which had originally pointed to June 2026, stretched to September, then to 2027. Tesla and Musk pointed to the backlog as proof of overwhelming demand. Critics called it something closer to a bait, a cheap headline number designed to generate reservations and a wave of favourable headlines before quietly disappearing. It wasn't the first time Tesla had tried the trick. The very rear-wheel drive trim this new truck replaced had launched the year before at a similarly aggressive price, only to be pulled from the lineup within 5 months once it became clear almost nobody wanted the stripped-down version on its own merits. Even at $69,990, the truck still cost roughly 40% more than the dual-motor version Musk had originally promised in 2019, and adjusted for 7 years of inflation, it still ran about $7,000 over that original figure. Tesla folded the launch into a broader lineup shuffle, trimming a luxury package off the range-topping Cyberbeast and cutting its price from $114,990 down to $99,990, then quietly began listing pre-owned Cybertrucks on its own site, starting around $66,200, an admission that the used market had become part of the strategy too. The fix, in other words, arrived nearly 2 years too late, priced too high once the introductory window closed, and delivered too slowly to change any of the numbers that were already public. Q1 2026 still posted as the worst quarter in Cybertruck history, because the cheaper truck that was supposed to save it hadn't even reached a single driveway yet. So where does the Cybertruck actually stand right now? Tesla's stock is consolidating in the $300 to $330 range, well under Wall Street's average target near $403, and prediction markets aren't pricing in much movement before month's end. The Cybertruck hasn't shown up as a genuine growth driver in Tesla's last 4 quarterly reports, and the company's broader vehicle sales fell in 2025 to their lowest level since 2022, the same year BYD sold more electric vehicles worldwide than Tesla did for the first time. Tesla's own public messaging has quietly drifted away from the truck entirely, toward the robotaxi service it launched in Austin, and toward humanoid robots. The kind of story that doesn't require anyone on an earnings call to explain why a stainless steel pickup with 1 million reservations keeps selling worse every single year it stays on the market. Whether that pivot works is still an open question. The Cybertrucks is not. The lesson of the Cybertruck's collapse was never really about one strange-looking truck. It's about what happens when a company builds an entire product around the idea that attention is the same thing as demand, and mythology is the same thing as a business model. 1 million people reserving a truck sight unseen was never proof that 1 million people wanted to own one, at that price, with those recalls, under that CEO's name. Tesla proved it could get 1 million people to put down $100 on a rendering. What it couldn't do was convince most of them to actually take delivery once the truck stopped being an idea and started being a bill, a recall notice, and a depreciation curve. Every year since launch, the gap between what Musk promised on that stage in 2019 and what actually showed up in driveways has gotten wider, not narrower. Stainless steel doesn't rust. It turns out demand does.